Two-step equations. So we're going to spend the next couple weeks in this equations unit, and we're going to solve all different types of equations, from pretty simple to sort of medium level to really complex. But by the time we're done, you guys are going to be pros at solving equations. So we're going to start with that basic, that two-step equation. So what exactly makes something an equation? So that EQU, that prefix in there, means something. So that EQUA means equal. Okay, so what do we need to have an equation? We need to have an equal sign. Okay, in order for something to be an equation, we have to have an equal sign. So when we want to solve equations, we always want to get x by itself. We're going to be solving for x, so x has to be all alone and positive on one side. So how do we do this? Well, in order to get x alone and all by itself on one side of the equal sign, we need to think about our inverse operations. So what does it mean to be an inverse operation? So the inverse of addition, I'm sure you know, to undo addition, we have to do subtraction. So therefore, the inverse of subtraction, to undo subtraction, we have to do addition. And then what about the inverse of multiplication? Well, that is division. And what's the inverse of division? Well, that's multiplication. Okay, so let's look at some of these examples here. So it says 4 minus x divided by 5 equals negative 1. And then we have this second equation over here, okay, so this first one's got some fractions in it. Well, it's got a fraction in it, okay, and this one has some decimals in it. And then this one just has all whole numbers, okay? So we should say integers, okay? This one just has integers in it, okay? So I'm going to start with one of my own. I'm going to make one a little bit different over here. And I'm just going to start real basic and say, okay, what if I have 2x plus 1 equals 5? Okay, so this is a two-step equation. If I want to get x by itself, what do I need to undo first? So let's think about our order of operations that you guys are probably really familiar with. Okay, and that's PEMDAS, okay, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So you're real familiar with that order. Well, when we're solving equations, we almost have to reverse that order in which we do things. So if we reverse that order, we've got to think subtraction and addition has to be done first, and then followed by multiplication and division, followed by your exponents, then followed by your parentheses. Okay, so we reverse our order of operations thought process when we're solving equations. So I'm going to draw this line down from the equal sign to separate the left side of the equation from the right side. So if I need to reverse the order of operations here, I need to think, is there any addition or subtraction going on in this equation? And hopefully you would say, yes, there is addition. There's plus 1. So then you need to say, okay, how do I undo plus 1 or adding 1? I need to subtract 1. And in order for it to balance, you've got to make sure whatever you do with the left side, you've got to do to the right side. So what's negative? Or why am I crossing this out? Maybe I shouldn't. I'm getting ahead of myself, apparently. Wow. What is plus 1 minus 1? Okay, plus 1 minus 1. Those are opposites. That's the whole purpose. Okay, we're starting to get x by itself, so that equals 0. So I have 2x on the left-hand side here, and now do what you see. What is 5 minus 1? And that's 4. Now I go back and I keep examining that reverse order of my order of operations. I took care of any addition or subtraction. Now I look and see, is there any multiplication or division? We see that there is multiplication there. It's 2 times x. So how do I undo multiplying by 2? I've got to do the inverse of multiplying by 2, so I have to divide by 2 on both sides. So now what's 2 divided by 2? That's 1, or 1x. Is x all alone and positive? Yes, that's what we need. And now let's continue over onto the right side and do that calculation. What is 4 divided by 2? And it's 2. That is the solution to your equation. Okay, so x equals 2. So now let's go back to, let's kind of work backwards here. Let's take a look at number 3. So I'm going to do this same thing. I'm going to draw the line down to separate the left side from the right side. And I'm going to think about my variable. My variable is a. So I need to try to get a all by itself in positive. So I think about going in the reverse order of my order of operations, my addition or subtraction. And I look here and I've got some subtraction going on. Now I'm going to leave that a right there. That's what I'm solving for, so I'm not going to touch it yet. So I have a minus 4 here. So how do I undo subtracting 4? I'm going to have to add 4 to both sides, because that's going to allow me to start to get that a by itself. So negative 4 plus 4, that gives me 0. That's what I want. But now be super careful here. I've got this negative a here. What does that mean? What number is in front of that negative a? Well, that's really a negative 1. I always say mathematicians are lazy, and we don't like to write a lot of stuff. So really, you need to understand when you just see a negative sign in front of a variable, it's really a negative 1. And now let's do this calculation. What is 5 plus 4? It's 9. So now I ask myself, is my variable all by itself and positive? Well, it's kind of all by itself, but it's certainly not positive. So how do I undo? Remember, there's multiplication going on between that negative 1 and that a. So go back to your order of operations to undo it. You've got to multiply or divide. So what is the inverse of multiplying by negative 1? I've got to divide by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So finally, is my a all by itself? It sure is. Okay. A is all by itself there, equals. Now do this calculation. What is 9 divided by negative 1? Positive divided by a negative is a negative 9. Okay. It's always to get in a good habit to put a box around your answer, circle it, be nice and neat with a highlighter, anything like that. It's a really, really good idea. Okay, so let's look at this next one. So again, keep in mind undoing, I'm going to write it down here because I can't see it. I've scrolled down a bit. Reverse order of operations. So if I need to get this x by itself, I need to think, is there any addition or subtraction going on? Well, there is, and I've got this positive 4.7 here. So to undo that, I'm not going to touch that 0.25 yet because that's attached to the x. So I'm going to subtract 4.7 from both sides, and I get 0.25x equals, okay? So that's 6.2 minus 4.7. I might write down here, and go to your calculator. I'm going to do this one by hand. I don't have my calculator handy. So we end up with 5 and 1. So that's 1.5. So now we've got multiplication or division left over. How is that 25 hundredths attached to that Okay, x, it's attached by multiplication, so to undo it, we divide by 0.25. Those divide each other out. X equals, and now go to your calculator. What is 1.5 divided by 0.25? Or in other words, how many quarters are in $1.50? How many quarters in $1.50? I bet you could come up with that pretty quickly. Okay, that would be 6. So my x is all by itself, and it's positive, and my solution is x equals 6. I'm going to put a box around it, and then I'm on my last one. So this last one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw my line down to separate the left and the right side from my equation. And I'm going to start with reversing the order of operations. Is there any addition or subtraction? Well, I look to see where my variable is, and it's right here, and it's x divided by 5. But I also have this 4 here, this 4 minus x divided by 5. So I need to move over that 4. So it's right now, it's a positive 4. So what's the opposite of positive 4? It's a negative 4, or subtract 4. Positive 4 minus 4, that's 0. So now be real careful to write what's left. Negative x divided by 5. So now negative 1 plus a negative 4. Negative 1 minus 4 gives you, use your calculator if you need to, gives you a negative 5. Continuing, multiplication or division. Do I have any multiplication or division? Well, notice how I kind of stressed that. I said negative x divided by 5. So what's the opposite of dividing by 5? The opposite, or the inverse of dividing by 5, is multiplying by 5. So I'm going to put my 5 that I'm multiplying by in parentheses. Okay, instead of using the dot for multiplication, I'm going to put it in parentheses. So think about this. What's the opposite? Sorry about that. My phone was ringing. So what is, we've got opposites here, inverses here. Okay, multiplying by 5 and dividing by 5. Okay, that's our whole objective here, is to get those to divide out. So what are we left with? Negative x equals, what's negative 5 times positive 5? Negative 25. But is my variable all alone in positive? And your answer should be no, because what's there? We've got a negative 1 in front of that x. So how do I undo that multiplying by negative 1? I've got to divide by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So I'm left with x equals negative 25 divided by negative 1 gives you a positive 25. Put a box around or highlight, circle your answer. We are going to get lots of practice tomorrow in class. We've got great problems in your problem set. We've got a warm-up to do. We've got some activities to do for lots of practice with equations. See you guys tomorrow.